Hi guys, I just wanted to do a little lesson on what function notation is. So function notation is actually just a different way of writing a function without using the variable y. So it's really, on the surface of it, it looks really superficial, but it's actually quite an important change. So for example, if I have a function y equals x squared plus x, something I can do is write it as f of x equals x squared plus x without y. So firstly, I just want to say that the way you say this is f of x. So if you want to think about it this way, it's shorthand for f is a function of x. So meaning that for whatever this is, whatever the graph actually looks like, okay, whatever, x is the independent variable and f of x is the thing that depends on x. F is the function of x. Okay, so how do I use this? Well, if I ask you to do this, determine f of -2, what that is asking you to do is find, or sorry, evaluate f of x when x equals -2. So let's do it. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with f of x equals x squared plus x, and anywhere I saw an x value, I'm now going to replace it with x equals -2. It's very straightforward, actually. Okay, so I get f of -2 equals, and I have to put brackets around -2 because this power of 2 impacts the entire x value. -2, so I get f of -2 equals +2. Okay, so something nice about this answer is if I were to just look at the answer, let's say I was looking in the back of a textbook, what becomes really clear is that when I look at this answer, this tells me that when x equals -2, y, or f of -2, so actually, okay, f of -2 equals 2. Whereas if I did the same thing up here, okay, if I did the same thing up here, I would end up getting my final answer as y equals 2, right? Now in this case, I can't see what x is, right? But in this scenario, I can see what x is. I know very clearly that when x is -2, y is 2. So that's one benefit of function notation. Another thing is that if I look at number 2 now, okay, I could maybe call this one g of x equals -2x squared plus 8x minus 1. So another way to think of this is it's just a naming system. Okay, so what that means is, now let's say I want to graph these two things. Another benefit of function notation actually comes out when I graph and when I do any kind of algebra with these two functions. So what I want to do is go down here and let's graph now f of x, which is x squared plus x, and g of x, which I said was -2x squared plus 8x minus 1. Okay, let's start with g of x. Okay, so the first benefit is that if I want to graph two graphs on the same grid, I can still label the axes x and y, but what I can do is instead of writing the formula or the equation for this, I can just write this as g of x. And then when I put f of x on the same graph, I can put f of x, instead of having y and then another y and then calling it y1 and y2, I can just denote them as g and f. Now, one more benefit of this is, as we know, if we're given a function in factored form, it's easy to graph. So what we can do, this one is very easily factored, okay, is we can factor it and we can see that our x ints are going to be 0, 0 and -1, 0. So I can put those in 0, 0, -1, 0. And I know based on this that my axis of symmetry, okay, which is also the x value of my vertex, that's going to be -1/2. Okay, so if we went to graph this, we know that the vertex is somewhere along this line. So another benefit of function notation is I can say that I know that the y value of my vertex is f at xv. Okay, so I can use this notation to talk about the y value of my vertex. Okay, so if I want to evaluate f of xv, okay, this is how I'm going to write it. And I can even sub it into my first equation there, the one that isn't factored, because they're the same. Okay, and if I put it in this form, I can very clearly see that my x value and my y value are clearly shown. Okay, so I can do that there. And again, I mean, this isn't going to be perfect. Oops, that's really not perfect. This isn't going to be perfect, but what's nice about this is now I can call this f of x and g of x without having to write out their full equations.